At 6:47 local time, 40 nautical miles northwest of Watsuri Island, the JS Kirasame, a Murasame-class destroyer of the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, was carrying out a routine but highly sensitive surveillance mission when the situation suddenly changed. Without warning, the Chinese CNS vessel, a Luoyang 3-class guided missile destroyer, broke formation and surged toward the Japanese warship. The tension in the air said everything. The message from the Chinese commander was clear even without words. Move now, or your course will be chosen for you. But on the bridge of the nearby U.S. Navy destroyer, the situation was already being tracked in full. The USS McCampbell, DDG-85, an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, was closely monitoring the encounter. Its Aegis combat system was fully active, reading the signature of the entire Chinese flotilla. There were only 11 seconds left before the Chinese destroyer crossed the internationally recognized safety margin for naval maneuvering, turning a gray zone pressure tactic into an extremely dangerous near collision, with the potential to spark a serious international incident over 5 small, uninhabited rocks. This was not a misunderstanding. It was a calculated test of the US-Japan security alliance. And Beijing was about to be reminded why challenging the combined strength of America and its allies in the East China Sea remains a serious strategic mistake. Tensions in the East China Sea have rarely been this high or this tightly wound. What started as a routine Japanese patrol near its territorial waters quickly escalated into a full 3-dimensional confrontation when the People's Liberation Army Navy pushed a 6-ship formation deeper into the disputed waters around the Senkaku Islands, known in Beijing as the Diaoyu Islands. For decades, these uninhabited pieces of land have stood at the center of one of Asia's most dangerous flashpoints, protected by the 1960 Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan. Under that agreement, any hostile move against Japan's administration of these islands would directly involve the United States. The Chinese maneuver, led by 2 powerful Type 05 2D destroyers and supported by the large Type 903A Dongpinghu replenishment ship, followed a classic gray zone playbook. Apply pressure, push boundaries, and test the response without crossing fully into open conflict. The goal was not necessarily open combat, but sustained pressure, repeated close passes, aggressive maneuvering, and a tempo designed to wear Japan down until it hesitated, weakened its position, or cast doubt on how firmly Washington would stand behind its ally. More than $5.3 trillion in global trade moves through these vital sea lanes every year. And Beijing's broader strategy is to introduce uncertainty into one of the world's most important economic corridors. This particular deployment appears to have been designed to push the JS Kirasame out of position, probe for gaps in the combined surveillance network, and generate footage that Chinese state media could later frame as proof that the US-Japan alliance was fragile and reluctant to respond under pressure. Instead, the American reaction was swift, disciplined, and deliberate, sending a powerful signal without unnecessary theatrics. The USS McCampbell was already in place, positioned like a silent shadow along the formation's flank. While remaining outwardly calm, its systems were collecting a detailed electronic and tactical picture of the entire Chinese group. That is the difference between a regional pressure campaign and a global security commitment. In this video, we'll break down how the training, coordination, and advanced capabilities of the US Navy and the MSDF allowed them to turn a carefully staged provocation into a strategic setback for Beijing, with the kind of detailed perspective you rarely get elsewhere. If you value clear analysis of how American and allied naval forces hold the line under pressure, follow the channel for more stories like this, because moments like these help explain why open sea routes still matter to all of us. The opposing force in this tense maritime contest was the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy, a fleet that has expanded rapidly in size but still trails in some of the areas that matter most: real-world operational experience, command maturity, and fully integrated naval doctrine. At the center of this formation was the Type 052 Luoyang 3-class guided missile destroyer, a warship Beijing often presents as its answer to Aegis-equipped vessels. It is a serious platform, displacing around 7,500 tons and carrying 64 vertical launch cells. But its operational style often leans more on intimidation and visible pressure than on the careful management of escalation. In this region, China's motivation is tied closely to domestic political messaging, reinforcing historical claims through assertive physical presence and ensuring those actions can be presented to a nationalist audience at home. The psychological element is central to the strategy. Beijing Rashidovich to a larger formation and more aggressive posture will create hesitation and force the Allied side into mistakes. One of the key concerns was that the Huainan carried the YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missile, a highly capable long-range system believed to reach beyond 290 nautical miles. with a very high-speed terminal phase intended to challenge even advanced naval defenses. This was the sharp edge of the formation. The psychological pressure grew even stronger because of the task group's size, which also included a Type 054A frigate, an electronic surveillance ship, and the replenishment vessel already mentioned. Altogether, the deployment was meant to showcase a sustained far seas presence, the kind of blue water reach Beijing is eager to prove it can maintain. The strategy followed a familiar pattern of gradual pressure, small deliberate steps that slowly changed the situation on the water, such as cutting the distance from 2,000 yards to just 500. The idea was to see how far they could push US and Japanese rules of engagement without provoking a direct military exchange. The Chinese commander's instructions were clear. Stay close, stay aggressive, force the Kirisame to keep altering course, and gather detailed data on Allied sensor performance. The real danger was not only the missile loadout, serious as it was, but the doctrine behind the operation, a method of controlled disorder designed to wear down the tactical focus and mental discipline of the crew on the opposing bridge. The US-Japan Joint Force answered that pressure with a textbook display of integrated technological superiority, the result of decades of investment and tightly coordinated training. At the center of that deterrent was the USS McCampbell DDG-85, a highly capable Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, Flight II A variant. Displacing more than 9,200 tons, the McCampbell was essentially a floating fortress built around the Aegis combat system and its AN/SPY, 1DV multifunction passive electronically scanned array radar. That system remains the benchmark for naval air and surface surveillance, able to monitor more than 100 targets at once, at ranges beyond 200 nautical miles, giving the McCampbell and its Japanese partner an almost complete picture of the entire battle space. The ship's Mark 41 vertical launch system, with more than 90 cells, carried a mix of SM-2 standard missiles for wide-area air defense and SM-6 missiles that extended both anti-air and missile defense coverage far beyond 130 nautical miles. Just as important, the JS Kirisame, although smaller at around 4,550 tons, was tightly linked through the Cooperative Engagement Capability Data Network. That meant the Japanese destroyer could launch its own Sea Sparrow missiles using the McCampbell's Superior Spy 1D tracking data, effectively turning the two ships into one large sensor and shooter network spread across miles of ocean. Kirisame also carried its own FCS-3 active phased array radar, giving it strong local air defense capability. In practice, these were not simply two separate destroyers operating side by side. They were two connected nodes inside a single defensive grid, sharing targeting solutions and tracking data in near real time. By comparison, the Chinese Type 052D's Type 3 46AA ESA radar was capable in its own right and often promoted as a peer system, but it has long been viewed as less refined in data processing speed and sustained multi-target coordination than the more mature Aegis baseline. Every system aboard the McCampbell was operating at a high alert posture. The AN/SLQ-32V 3 electronic warfare suite was quietly scanning Chinese communications bands and radar frequencies, recording every pulse and every signal, building an electronic profile that would remain valuable to Allied intelligence for years. This was not simply a show of presence on the water, it was also an information advantage, turning Beijing's pressure tactic into a major intelligence gain for the alliance. The tension peaked at 06:55 local time. The CNS Hainan, after steadily increasing speed, had closed to just 700 yards off the starboard side of the JS Kirisame and was still moving in. The Chinese captain's intention was becoming obvious. Execute a fast, close crossing maneuver, a highly risky tactic in which the 7,500-ton destroyer would cut directly across Kirisame's bow, forcing the Japanese ship to turn away sharply or face the danger of collision. For Beijing, that would have delivered the image it wanted most, a Japanese withdrawal under pressure. Inside the McCampbell's Combat Information Center, the mood was calm, disciplined, and intensely focused. The surface warfare coordinator reported the contact in a steady voice, noting that the target was closing rapidly, now at 700 yards and moving toward the planned course line. On the bridge, Commander David Axel Foley watched the situation unfold on the displays. He understood exactly what was at stake. A collision in that moment could be spun into a much wider regional crisis. But the McCampbell's crew had trained for this kind of brinkmanship again and again, and their doctrine was clear. Hold course, hold speed, show resolve, and remain ready to protect the Japanese ship if required. Foley gave the next order. The AN/SLQ-32 was placed on active standby, electronic tracking intensified, and a complete fire control solution was taken on the Hainan's 130mm main gun radar. JMSDF command was alerted. The Allied force was fully tracking the situation and prepared for the next move. That was the decisive moment. No shot was fired, but the electronic warfare suite began projecting a concentrated field of radio frequency interference, disrupting the clarity of the Chinese ship's sensors and communications with a wave of electronic noise. At the same time, deep inside the CIC, the Aegis system established a complete fire control solution on the Hainan. Everything was now aligned, monitored, and ready. On the bridge of the Hainan, the Chinese captain saw two developments almost at once. First, his own radar and communication systems began to degrade without warning, with important targeting information flickering and losing stability. Second, neither the Kirisame nor the McCampbell changed course or reduced speed. Both ships held steady in perfect coordination. The message was delivered without a single radio call. It came through composure, discipline, and unmistakable unity. The Allied ships were fully connected, fully aware, and fully prepared to respond. Faced with that synchronized stance and the growing weight of electronic pressure, the Chinese commander made his decision. At 6:56, with only 350 yards left before crossing the Kirisame's bow, the Hainan finally broke off the maneuver and turned hard to port, its heavy weight cutting across the water in a clear sign of tactical withdrawal. The pressure had reached its limit and China backed off first. In the minutes that followed, the tension quickly drained from the area. What remained was the calm, methodical professionalism that defines both the U.S. Navy and the MSDF. The immediate danger had passed, but the consequences of the encounter were only beginning to take shape. The Chinese vessel returned to the main formation, reducing speed from 30 knots to a routine 12. Its attempt to disrupt the Allied patrol had failed completely. For Beijing, the mission ended in frustration, exposed not only by the abrupt turnaway, but by the very public display of how steady and coordinated the U.S.-Japan alliance remained under pressure. The USS McCampbell and the JS Kirisame never changed course or speed. That alone sent a powerful message. The Allies controlled the tempo, and China was forced to respond. The cost of that failed provocation came in several forms. First, there was the strategic cost. The Chinese acceleration, maneuvering pattern, and sensor activity handed Allied intelligence teams a valuable stream of operational data, including speed profiles, maneuver limits, and electronic signatures. The AN/SLQ-32 suite captured everything from the frequency bands used by Chinese identification systems to the subtle electronic exchanges moving through the formation. Second, there was the cost in time, fuel, and wear. The aggressive high-speed run consumed large amounts of fuel, added strain to the Hainan's propulsion systems, and produced nothing except a visible loss of momentum at the most critical moment. The immediate result was a clear Allied success. America's commitment to Japan had been reinforced at sea. The combined patrol formation remained intact, and the Chinese ships were forced back into simple shadowing, the very status quo they had hoped to undermine. For the crew of the McCampbell, the rhythm afterward became controlled and routine again. In the Combat Information Center, the Aegis system stepped back from its highest state of alert into a sustained watch posture. On the bridge, Commander Foley recorded the outcome in the log with a brief and telling summary. Chinese provocation countered, Allied course maintained, no deviation from patrol plan. That quiet ending says a great deal about real military professionalism. The true objective is not drama. It is preventing a crisis while still achieving the strategic goal through discipline, restraint, and total control. The lesson from the East China Sea is simple, but many challengers still ignore it. You cannot win a contest at sea if you do not fully understand the field in front of you or the coordination of the force standing opposite. Beijing sent a large modern fleet, clearly believing that numbers, pressure, and proximity would be enough to shake Allied resolve. Instead, it ran into a force that helped write the modern rules of maritime coordination. This encounter showed that the Aegis combat system is more than a U.S. advantage. It functions as the shared command and control core of the wider U.S.-Japan alliance, allowing two separate destroyers to operate with the cohesion of a single, highly resilient platform. Just as important was the human factor. The sailors who held course in the face of intense pressure proved that training, discipline, and composure matter more than size alone. Technology matters, but it only reaches its full value in the hands of crews trained to trust it and each other. The broader message was unmistakable. The United States and its allies are not looking for confrontation, but they will not accept reckless behavior at sea or attempts to rewrite established norms through intimidation. What was demonstrated that day was clear. The Senkaku Islands remain under protection. The alliance remains solid, and pressure tactics in the East China Sea will be met not with panic, but with calm coordination, discipline, and a level of technological integration that is extremely difficult to shake. Let me know in the comments. Should they have taken a more visible deterrent posture, or was the psychological and electronic response enough? See you in the next video.